So we are going to get started, and it's not that I fear that you won't be able to hear me, but we are recording this for anyone who wasn't able to make it here this evening, so that's why I have the microphone. So I'm going to try to juggle everything I have in my hands in order to move the PowerPoint closer. Thank you all for coming out on this rainy evening. We're very happy to have you. And as I entitled the presentation, this is all about proposed upgrades and renovations, and while there are some things that you're going to hear about that we are pretty certain we are going to be moving forward with, we also do want to hear your input and any suggestions that you may have for additional improvements. At this point, nothing is off the table. And so that's why we called this meeting, because we're really interested in hearing what people have to say. I do want to introduce some of the people who are here this evening. David Schrader over at the end of the table. Dave is from Schrader Group Architects, who actually have laid out a lot of the plans that you're going to see this evening that we are proposing. Harry Petoni, Harry, raise your hand. And Devin Bradbury, who are also from Schrader Group Architects. And I will tell you that our board of school directors went through a very intensive process to identify which architects would be our architects of record for this project, as well as for the planned K-1-2 elementary project. And the reason that they went through such an intensive process is because there are a lot of good groups that are out there, and it's very hard, it's very competitive, and we wanted to ensure that we had the best group working with us. And one of the things that we really liked about Schrader Group were their ideas and their creativity and a number of things that they were proposing. And plus, of course, they were extraordinarily competitive price-wise, and are, of course, working with us in terms of cost for all of these things. So tonight we're just talking about the high school and the proposed areas that we're looking at. But I do want to let you know that I think in the broader context, it's important for all of you to understand that as a real estate entity in the township, and obviously an important one, we are now serving over almost 2,400 students, which is a very significant increase from when I became superintendent 4.5 years ago. It's a 20% increase district-wide. We have a third more students now that are occupying Enfield and Erdenheim, and pretty soon those kids are going to be coming up through the middle school and into the high school. So in order to accommodate their needs, a number of things have to take place across the district. Unfortunately, most of them result in higher costs, but of course, as I said, we have to accommodate all of the children who come to us, and we are in competition with a number of the schools surrounding us. And I'm not just talking about parents' decisions to move to Upper Dublin or Wissahickon, as may happen, but also all of the private schools which surround us. Obviously, for each child that makes the decision to come to Springfield Township High School, we get more money from the state. So there are costs involved that come into us as the result of more students coming into our schools. So I think that's important to know also. It's also important that we continually look out for our investments. We just went through a financial audit in the district, and part of what's included in that audit is a statement of our assets. And all of our facilities, primarily buildings, are assets. They're called fixed assets. And to the extent that we keep those assets in good repair, that helps to secure and to safeguard our financial rating for the district, our ability to finance debt if we have to, and of course it makes our audit come out better when we take care of our assets. Because we have not only about 2,400 students, and we have several hundred staff members here in the district, we have to make sure that our facilities are safe for everyone as well. So a considerable amount of time as well as expense goes into maintaining those facilities. So what you're going to see tonight, and the rationale behind a number of these upgrades, is the fact that we feel some of them, quite frankly, it's not just a desire to make things better, but it's a need because of safety issues. So there are two planned phases of some of the improvements we're going to be talking about tonight. And one thing I want you to understand is these two phases are simultaneous. So the planning for both of these phases is ongoing right at this moment. So while certain things will take place and will occur before others will, the planning, the timelines are established, and some of the steps that we have to take in order to accomplish some of these things are actually taking place now, even if it's entitled Phase 2. So for example, any proposed changes about building a new auxiliary gym or changing the outside campus, which you're going to hear about, changing the entrance into the high school campus. We have to go through extensive land development and many approvals, including from PennDOT. Those all can take anywhere from 8 to 12 months to secure. So we can start the planning now, and we may actually be finished if we go through some of the improvements in Phase 1, such as putting turf on the stadium field. We'll finish that even though we're simultaneously getting the approvals and the planning done for Phase 2. So I just wanted everybody to kind of understand that. So these are the Phase 1 needs that we're going to talk about. And most of these, by the way, came about as a result of conversations that we had with another group of architects who actually did a feasibility study that was commissioned by the district a couple of years ago. And in that feasibility study, we looked at everything across the district, our entire infrastructure, including the interior of the buildings, the HVAC, the heating, the ventilation, the air conditioning. We looked at all of our fields. We looked at traffic flow. We looked at every possible aspect of our district. We also had numerous conversations with the people who inhabit the buildings and said, what are the needs that you see? You live here every day. What is it that you feel are some issues? Here at the high school in particular, we talked to students. And we said, what are some of the problem areas that you're noting that you feel really need improvement here? So the culmination of all of that really is the recommendations that you see before you. So one of the critical needs that was identified was turf fields, that we are one of the few districts, as you'll see, that does not have turf fields. But competition aside, in terms of who's around us, one of the concerns about that was a significant loss of playing time. Our kids can't get out on the field when the weather is bad because it's muddy, it's sloppy, they risk injury. In other school districts which have turf fields, they can get out there as soon as the snow is cleared. Doesn't matter whether it's wet, doesn't matter whether it's early spring. We lose a significant amount of playing time. What's significant about that is not just the fact that, okay, well, so what, our teams won't be as competitive. There's a huge risk for injury when kids can't get out there and practice and have a good amount of practice and playing time, especially when they're playing against other kids who have had that practice and are much more physically fit than they are. So that's really our primary concern with that. The other difference, especially, I'm going to point out field hockey, for example. Field hockey, when you play on grass, is significantly slower. And the condition of the field is very, very critical to obviously how the ball rolls. So we have two main issues with our current field hockey field. And those of you who know our field hockey team, they're a phenomenal team. They've had a phenomenal coach, Linda Nixon, for the past, 20-some years. She's 50 years she's been coach, Nancy? Oh my God, thank you for correcting me. She certainly deserves that recognition. I had no idea it was that long, so thank you for that. So, here we have a field hockey field where our kids play on a field that looks like this, which you may be able to see in some of the photos that I have for you. Not to mention the fact that nearly every other team that they're playing has been practicing on and playing on a turf field, and the ball goes significantly faster. So that's just one of the areas that we're looking at, is the synthetic playing surfaces. So this gives you an idea of current playing condition of the fields. And when the weather is extraordinarily hot, no matter how much we irrigate, we get these kind of patchy areas in the fields, which quite frankly are dangerous for kids to play on. Because if it's a rough surface, if there are ruts in the field and they step on it the wrong way, they can tear an Achilles, the meniscus. It's very, very dangerous for kids, whether they're playing soccer, field hockey, or any other of the other sports. This shows our football stadium, where we also have proposed a turf field. Shows some of the rough patches where the stars are. You can see from an aerial Google view what it looks like on the field. And again, it's the same thing in terms of risk for injuries for kids because of those patchy areas. If it's not an even level field, kids can trip over that and it becomes extraordinarily dangerous, especially when they're running in a busy contact sport. It's hard to see in these photos, but I don't know if you can tell in the one on the left here where the downward slope is. So again, depending upon which half of the game they're playing, they either have a tremendous advantage or a terrible disadvantage. And this is part of that same field. And obviously you can see we have some pretty significant issues in terms of the unevenness of the field. So these are our neighbors and the teams, a lot of the teams that we play that do have what we call a competitive edge because they play on turf. I had a parent who met with me who told me my daughter's considering going to Mount St. Joe's, and they're looking at academics, but they're also looking at facilities. And a lot of our neighbors around us, LaSalle, Mount St. Joe's, Germantown Academy, Germantown Friends, recruit our kids because they want them to go there if they're good athletes. And when our kids don't have that competitive edge because we can't offer it to them, we lose them. We lose a number of kids. The worst offender, Bishop McDevitt, they're able to take a lot of our kids over there. And so we want to be able to develop that in our kids. And these are, of course, are a number of the school districts surrounding us and the ones that we play as well that have this competitive edge. So this is another area that we have proposed for phase one. It's a little hard to tell in this particular picture, but we actually had our track resurfaced a number of years ago, and right from the very beginning, there were issues with it. And you can probably see a little bit better here where I have the arrows. Same thing. This is not working. There we go. Over in this area, you can see how worn it is. And along the side here, and I'll show you a close-up, the edge is really worn. So for the student who is running in that lane, if they happen to go over the edge, as sometimes does happen, tripping is an extraordinary hazard. So you can see here what those worn edges look like on the track and the need for the resurfacing there. And then over here where I put these yellow lines in, I don't know if you can see, but there's a crease. Can you see that? Right down here. There's another one here. And this is a pretty small subsection of the track. It's throughout almost the entire track. So obviously when our kids are running on that, they are at high risk of tripping. The other area that we are talking about is building on an auxiliary gym. And many people say, well, you only have 600 and some kids in the high school. What the heck do you need another gym for? We already have limited space in our gym. Scheduling our physical education classes is a huge issue for us. And again, that's with 600 and some students. And as I explained to you before, in the not too distant future, we're going to be up to around 750 and then 800 students all playing in that same gym. Right now we have a huge amount of competition for that space, not to mention the fact that we have a lot of community teams that can't use it because we've got it used all the time, and they're going down to use the Enfield gym instead. So one of the issues that we have is when there is inclement weather, all the teams that are outdoor sports want the kids to be able to get practice and want them to continue to develop and work on their skills, especially in the spring. There's huge competition for all of the outdoor sports to come in and carve out some time for that gym, which is a tremendous issue. During the day with our physical education classes, there are times when we have 2 classes in there at once, which makes for a very dangerous phys ed condition. When you have one phys ed teacher working and trying to work at one side of the gym, another phys ed teacher trying to work at the other side, and then you have 60, maybe 70 or 80 kids in there at the same time. It's very problematic. We also have, as you'll see in some of the photos, a really inadequate locker room area there. I'm going to show you some of the photos, as well as some really outdated fitness facilities for our kids. So these are our training facilities, and as you can see up here, this is actually a corridor. It is not the fitness center. And because we don't have enough space for all of our equipment and for the kids to work out, they have their equipment here, their bench pressing and so forth, right in the corridor because there's no other room. Underneath is a concrete floor, so if any equipment gets dropped, it's kind of a risk to the flooring that's below it. Here, this is plywood that they have to try to protect the floor that's underneath the area. And remember, you may have tons and tons of kids in there any day who are working out and trying to get what they need in order to get themselves into shape. And of course, that's something that we promote. We want physical activity. We want physical fitness for our kids. We want them to be able to work out and to develop themselves. And if you read any science health journals, that's what everyone is advocating, is physical activity for the kids. These are some of our locker room spaces. The reasons they are like that is not because kids have dropped their stuff down. This is our stuff. As you can see, we don't have adequate storage space. So the kids come in and there's tripping hazards and there's minimal opportunity for us to store any of this in the locker room areas. This is the entrance into the gym area, which looks fine when it's empty. But when we have major events in the gym, whether it's a well-attended basketball game, or a couple weeks ago I was here, we had a very well-attended EEHSP event where we had, I believe it was over 1,000 people who attended, and it was sold out. We had the entire gym filled. I don't know if any of you were able to be here for that great event. It was terrific. But let me tell you something. It was virtually impossible. The line was like wrapping around in all kinds of different directions. It was hard to walk out from the gym down the corridor past what was the concession stand to be able to get past this area. It actually, in my opinion, was kind of a fire hazard, but they had no choice in terms of where they set up where the tickets were because there was actually no room for it. So one of the other areas that we are looking at, and I'm going to again show you some pictures. How many of you are high school parents? Or were? Okay. So if you've ever tried to come into the high school or leave the high school at any time during the early morning hours when students are coming in for class, or in the afternoon when it's dismissal time, or actually quite... Pardon me? You can be. You can be. You can actually be a community member who has no children in our district who comes down Springfield Way and tries to go out that way as well. So you're absolutely correct. A lot of people use that. I use it several times a day as well when I'm coming back and forth from the high school, sometimes back and forth to Erdenheim. I'll go that way instead of around Hawes. And it is virtually impossible either to come in and turn in or certainly to turn out, especially the dreaded left turn onto Paper Mill Road because of the location of Route 309. So here's our current and existing campus as seen from the air. And here are the stars showing 309 in the exit ramp and where we are right here. And then there's this little squiggly red line, which If you know where you're going and you know that you have to get to the entrance of the school, hidden over here, you're okay. You make your way around the circle. You hope nobody's coming through here on Springfield Way. We did just put a stop sign up because we felt that might be a little bit helpful for the time being, but a lot of people are still coming right through. So we have this terrible cross here with people coming in, people coming down, and then trying to find their way around. So this is kind of a tongue-in-cheek way of saying when you come in off the road, this is that main driveway coming off of Paper Mill. Here's Springfield Way, and where the heck are you? If you've never been to our high school, if you don't know where we're located, you have no way of finding our front entrance because it's not visible from anywhere where you are coming into our campus. I'm sorry? Not without difficulty. Eventually, they make their way here, yes.
Yes, you eventually, as somebody who grew up here and say, I have no idea. I moved here from my school and I have no idea where that is.
Most people don't. If they haven't grown up in the area,
Make laps that you get from
yeah, if it's their first time here, I mean, you're right. After you've been here, you know where you're going. But unfortunately, not everyone, we have a lot of newcomers. And especially, we're always getting new students in and parents from opposing teams who come for athletic events. And they don't know where they're going if their student is a freshman and they've never been to our high school before, or our own students when they first come. So this is that unidentifiable entrance and the circle area around it. And I will tell you, when I first came here, to the board meeting when I was being approved as superintendent. The board meeting was being held that evening in the auditorium. So I followed someone over here to the high school because I had no idea where I was going. And I kept going. I came in here and I went around that circle past the entrance, and I just kept going back here until I realized I can't go back there any further. I thought there was a back way around the building. There is not. This is a dead end. So unless you, pardon me?
That's what they make signs for.
That's correct. That's correct. This is the backup from some of the buses, not all of the buses that we have. The reason it's dark is Dr. Rittenhouse over there, who monitors our traffic for us in the morning very often, took the picture early in the morning, and it is not only dark there, but the buses back up because we don't have a significant loading space or unloading space for the students. So as you can well imagine, this creates some traffic issues because the cars can't come down here while the buses are here.
Is that at the cafeteria entrance?
This is. This is back at the cafeteria, yes. So this is a typical day exiting the high school. And as I mentioned before, one of the reasons for the backup is because a lot of these cars, there's one lane here, not a double lane. So these cars are all waiting. They may be wanting to make a right-hand turn out of the high school parking lot, but they have to wait until all these cars get out, and many of them are trying to make a left-hand turn, which in the middle of the day between 2:30 and 3 o'clock is virtually impossible with the cars coming from either end of Paper Mill.
Why isn't there a no left turn sign posted at the entrance to the high school? Why are you even allowed to make a left turn?
That's a police and or PennDOT issue. We don't make that determination, but even if you're making a right, because of the traffic coming off of Route 309, it's pretty significant.
There is literally taking your life into your hands, and then factor in that some of the people might be inexperienced drivers. It's insane.
It absolutely.
On Paper Mill Road yesterday morning.
Yeah. We actually last year had a near accident with a student coming in at the same time as a bus driver who didn't see the student pulling in. And the student was an inexperienced driver. It wasn't her fault. I mean, fortunately, we were able to avoid an accident, but it was a real near miss. And that, could potentially be quite tragic if something... Did you have a question?
I was just going to comment that years ago, and maybe it was even 10 years ago, that it used to be that you couldn't turn left on there. And then I think when they reconfigured Paper Mill Road,
Yeah, I think that's
all of a sudden that sign disappeared.
Oh, interesting.
Why again? It was but it used to be that you could not turn
Yeah.
for exactly those reasons.
Yeah.
Exactly
So-
right. And
But
this became an even bigger nightmare when they reconfigured Paper Mill Road. When they did what they did to Paper Mill Road, it made it a model.
And it's not just going out, it's coming in as well. And if you're coming down Paper Mill from the direction of Cheltenham Avenue, just making a left-hand turn into the high school. Yeah. I hear you. So here is one of the proposed, and Dave will talk about this a little bit later, one of the ideas we have that we feel would solve several of those issues, and that would be, rather than having the turn into the high school property around over here, it would be further down on Paper Mill Road, and when you would pull in, parking would be moved to make space for more fields, which we greatly need, and then the turn in would be right into the high school entrance. So that would solve two of the primary issues. One is the dangerous traffic flow. By moving this down, there's more of an opportunity for people to wait out the cars and to have less traffic. And then it would come right up here behind the stadium or in front of the stadium. Traffic would all be, or rather parking would all be relocated. We could have bus routes in there, separate them out from parent traffic. And then we also don't have the congestion at Springfield Way. There would be a straightaway here. So we feel that would solve a number of the issues, as would moving traffic back behind the building as well. So we would have a straightaway going through the back. Yes?
Since that still doesn't alleviate people having to sit in the traffic on Paper Mill Road, because you still have a lot of traffic from that light congestion on Paper Mill Road, is there any way that they can just reconfigure it so that you enter off of Paws Lane and come around the back part of the property here to the front entrance?
Are you talking about somewhere up this way?
Yeah, like up, like if you were to come up, so you basically, if you would come up Springfield, either up Springfield Way here
Right.
and cut over
Come over and around? Is that what you're talking about?
around this way, like if you were either come up Springfield Way here and cut around this way, or on the back side of this Public Works building that we have here, like behind that, and cut that out to like Hawes Lane. So you're just going from Hawes Lane and cut that down to the front entrance to the high school. Is there a way to do that so you're just bypassing Paper Mill Road altogether?
So I'm not sure I understand exactly everywhere you're talking about. I know that we have a couple of issues, obviously, with the location of the Erdenheim playground. You've got that huge hill here. We have a number of sports fields back here as well to accommodate our sports teams.
You're going to gain field space at Enfield when you knock down Enfield.
Yes, we are, if in fact we end up getting rid of all of Enfield, which we're not sure we're going to do. We may only end up getting one field out of that. So at this point, we're not quite sure about that. But anything's on the table at this point, and we're going to actually be writing ideas down. So thank you for that. So we did a survey. Did anybody here fill out the survey? Thank you. We really appreciate it. We got about 250 responses, which is phenomenal. We're very, very appreciative. And so I just want to quickly, before Dave comes on, talk about the questions that we asked and the results that we actually got. So these are actual results, unfiltered. I'm not commenting on what people wrote. This is what they said. So the first question pertained to the stadium and the track area. Do you have any additional suggestions? What are your concerns, comments, and so forth? The number one overwhelming question was about not the utility of turf fields, but the safety and the research that's out there that seems to be conflicting. There's some research out there that says turf fields are fine, especially in this day and age. They're much more improved than they ever were before. There's no risk for health reasons. Nobody needs to worry. On the other side of the coin, however, there is some research, there's a body of research that says, depending upon the types of materials that are being used, there are carcinogens in some of the materials, and some people who play for a continuous amount of time on turf fields can be at risk for health issues. We are looking very carefully at all of that research, and if we were to make the determination to go ahead with turf, and Dave can address this because he's an architect and works in a lot of places that use turf fields. And as I showed you 17 of our neighbors that use them. We would research that very, very carefully and make sure if we went ahead and did that, that we picked whatever is touted to be the safest material out there. So that was one issue. Another was, you're only going to use the stadium for football. Can't you use it for other sports? Absolutely. The intention is to line the field with lines for boys and girls soccer and for lacrosse. So it will be a multi-use field and not just be for football. It's a scheduling issue, and obviously we would have to schedule, but we also want it for community sports teams as well, because as everybody in the township knows, there's not a lot of space out there in the township for field hockey. Will have its own field with turf on it. That's the plan at this point. Okay? Pardon me, Nancy? Well, we're planning to do this. Dave's going to talk about timelines very quickly. Okay? That's why I said certain of these projects we can do quickly. Others, even though we're talking and planning them at the same time, they're going to take longer because they need more approvals. But we can put a turf field on the stadium if that's the direction in which we go, and field pretty quickly, okay? Another question was, what about the rest of the fields? Are you just doing the stadium? No. As you saw on the design schematic that I showed you before, we want to take maximum advantage of all the space that we possibly can eke out of this area, because we offer 21 sports. Not all of them are outdoor, but that's an awful lot of sports. 80% of our students are involved in at least one sport, and 70% of that number are involved in 2 sports. So the chances are, if you have that number of kids, most of those kids are involved in at least one outdoor sport. That's a significant portion of our population, not to mention all the community teams that are out there that are waiting to get on our fields as well. A couple people mentioned, hey, wait a minute, guys, you don't even have a football team. Why are you thinking about putting turf in the stadium? Very legitimate question. It's not a permanent solution. What happened this year was the result of many factors that unfortunately came together in a perfect storm, which resulted in the lack of a varsity football team. We did have JV football this year. Our intent is to grow the team, and we have been exploring ways that we can continue to build up our football program. So we are not canceling football indefinitely. Our plan is to continue to build, to regrow that, and to make it a great sport for everyone to continue to come out on Friday nights and watch football. There were some concerns about academics versus athletics. How come you're not pouring more money into your academic program? I can assure you we do. When you look at the numbers, we put close to $11 million of our budget into the high school academic program. Now, of course, that does include staffing. But similarly, we put about $680,000 a year into our athletic program. So we really believe that even though what we're proposing may sound like a lot of money for athletics, given the high number of students who are involved, given the high number of students in the community who are involved, given the fact that we want our kids not only to get a significant amount of physical activity and exercise because it contributes to their health and their emotional, social, and physical well-being, but we also feel that it's a complement to our academic program. When kids are involved in activities, and most of our kids spend 2 hours a day if they play a sport. That's 2 hours of a 6.5-hour day. Nearly a third of their day is spent being involved, for many of them, outdoors in our facilities. We really believe the reason it's a complement to the academic program is because they learn important skills about teamwork, getting along with others, perseverance, endurance, good exercise and physical activity. So we feel that when kids are involved in these kinds of endeavors after school, number one, they're not hanging out somewhere down in Orland or wherever else getting in trouble. They're involved with other kids, they're socializing, they're doing good things, and they're learning how to get along with other kids in a different way than sitting in a biology class. So we feel it's really, really important. And then finally, the other area from question 1, a number of people who obviously come to our games and our events out on the field talked about, can you update the snack bar? It's pretty yicky in there. Can you update the bathrooms? It's hard to find. It's hard to get into the training room, and so forth. Questions 2 and 3 had to do with the auxiliary gym. Yes, sir.
Just go back to the stadium for a second.
Sure.
Can you elaborate on how you envision the community sports clubs having access to that field? Is that something that you see them having access to just potentially on Saturday and Sunday? Or is it something they will be able to use for weekly practices? How do you envision those community teams having access to that?
Great question. And one of the things, by the way, that we are proposing is an upgrade in the lighting, which will help with that. There are 2 concerns about that. One, of course, is scheduling. So, and I'm not a scheduler. I can't tell you who plays when even right now. But hopefully, with good scheduling and more desirability for that field, we're going to be able to maintain a pretty constant scheduling of teams on that field. In fact, one of the people who's going to be sitting on this core planning team for this project is one of the people who's instrumental in running the township's boys soccer league, because we want to get information from them about what are your needs, when do you plan on using it, if we schedule you in from this time until this time, is that going to work for you? So that's one of the things that we're going to have to take a look at. The second thing that we really want to be mindful of is, with more use in that field, especially in the evenings when it's nice out and the lights are on, we want to be mindful of our neighbors back on Fraser Road, because they all back up to the field. A number of years ago, there was a memorandum of understanding with those neighbors about until what time will people be on that field with the lights on, how loud will the music be, and so forth. So we need to take that into consideration as well. So I apologize, I can't give you a definitive answer, but it's certainly on our minds that with a better field, we're going to have increased usage, and we just need to monitor that. Karen?
We charge the community for use of our facilities.
We do, yes. So, okay, so number 2, these were other concerns that came as a result of the survey. We haven't made a lot of decisions about some of these things yet. Number of people, they must all be swimming or water polo parents, expressed concern about the pool areas, the locker rooms there, which are in great need of upgrading. Some of the airflow issues, it's a relatively small area, and if you've ever sat in our pool area and watched a meet, especially water polo, as I have, you're there, the chlorine is like deadly, but it is a small area, and we need to look at that and see whether or not anything can be done about that. I mentioned signage before. We know we do need signage. Certainly it won't solve all of the issues that we've mentioned, but some good signage could be helpful. The lighting we talked about. The lighting standards are okay. It's the lights themselves out on the football field which need upgrading. We've got some heating and air conditioning concerns. Those are the kinds of facilities, things that we're looking at all the time in all of our schools. So outside of the scope of this particular project, we're going to be looking at that here in the high school. And then must have been some faculty members who are residents who filled out the survey, because somehow I had a lot of people who wanted a faculty bathroom in this area of the building, which was very interesting. Yes. Great question. Do you mind if I hold off answering that, because Dave is going to show you the schematic of that? It'll give you a clear explanation of exactly where it's going to be, okay? He's coming up in 2 seconds. I'm almost done. And then finally, the last one, everybody agreed in question number 4, which was about relocating the entrance and the traffic issues. These were the major concerns. Obviously, number 1, safety. The concerns about the exit and entrance, the lack of an identifiable main entrance to the building, and some people even mentioned parking as an issue, that the parking, you have to walk all the way up to get to the main entrance from where you are. As I showed you on the schematic, we would hope to be able to address that with parking directly in front of the main entrance of the building. So that's my piece where I've laid out for you, yes, some of the rationale behind what we are looking at. Dave's going to come and talk in a little bit more detail. Yes.
I don't know how many more years in a row you're going to raise taxes. They've been raised 14 years in a row, 3 times above the minimum. What are we doing for the seniors? Should we just move out of our houses because we can't afford to stay here? I mean, that school on Ball's Lane, which has been nothing but a disaster.
Thank you for raising the issue, and I respect.
In this township for 7 years, and it's getting to the point where I'm not allowed to sell my house.
And we hope that's not the case, and I respect you and your reason for wanting answers to those questions. I will tell you that in the past 5 years, we've had the lowest tax increases throughout the township.
It's still increased.
It is. It is.
Years in a row. That's a little bit ridiculous, don't you think?
Well, I would like to invite you, and if you give me your contact information, I'd be happy to have you come to our budget presentations so that you can hear where our dollars are going.
What about the reserves you have?
And the reserves as well, some of which, and Mr. King can address that, we are using to help fund these projects as well. Our reserves are like our savings account, and we need...
I try to have a savings account so I can live.
And I understand that, and I respect that. I do. We all do. Yes, sure.
I am a former administrator from Springfield Chestnut Hill Academy.
Yes.
I just want to commend you because we did a project that was similar to that when the 2 schools merged, and we rebuilt all of the turf fields. I was running development and communications at the time, and it united the school campus. We brought more students in. It was a huge retention tool, as you're saying. People are being recruited for colleges. And if you've never played on turf fields, it's very hard to get a second look from many schools who want to know that their kids that they're bringing in for university can do that. So I think that we need to do whatever we can to make the athletics match the academics here. And generally, I'm a graduate. I graduated in 1997. And the school looks, from an exterior standpoint, the way that it did when I left. And so I understand that you've got a huge group of kids moving through this district, and the district has to keep up.
And thank you as well for speaking up, as this woman did in the back. And we are trying to respect all perspectives and all points of view. And we realize that when we're thinking of undertaking this type of project, that we are going to have varying perspectives and points of view. I wouldn't mind tapping into your knowledge of what you went through over at Springside and Chestnut Hill as well, just to get some more information. Yes, yes,
Phase 1 and 2.
yes.
Before you move on, will you be summarizing costs at the end, or can we ask phase by phase what the projected cost?
Ken, do we have it delineated phase by phase or total cost? I mean, I know we have the stadium cost because that's broken out. Do you want to speak to that? Here, let me give you this. We can address it now. Okay, and then I'm going to have Dave take the stage. Not a problem, not a problem.
Here.
I have to move. Hello? Phase 1 is the stadium. We estimate, based on using the numbers from the feasibility study that Dr. Hackner mentioned that we had done back in 2015, That is estimated to cost approximately $2 million. The second phase of the high school, the auxiliary gym, the fields, although that is estimated, the construction costs are estimated to be about $21 million. $23 million in total for the construction costs. On top of that, there are some soft costs for all the professionals that are required that we need. So all in, we're looking at about $28 million for these two phases.
28 million?
Yes, all in.
Sorry?
I work in the industry, I'm not shocked.
We're not shocked. We're losing a lot of students. We are. I have one at the high school, one at the elementary, and one at the middle school. And these are conversations that we have with our friends day in and day out. And I'll be honest, I don't want to be
Okay. Okay.
You know, I'll be honest with you. We were a parent, you know, as we were entering high school that was considering to look alternate places. But we are losing a lot of our students, good quality students, I think because of the concern of the facilities. And this is something I believe that is imperative, that needs to be done. You know, I think a lot of people don't see the value in the athletics program. I think everyone thinks, you know, just a bunch of jocks. But we're looking for the livelihood of these kids and the things that they bring, you know, off the fields and in the classrooms, and just having these lifestyles and keeping our kids active and engaged and involved, and giving our community a place to go. Like my children play, you know, in other communities for programs. We play up in Upper Dublin, and those fields and facilities are used from 8 a.m. until Dr. Rittenhouse. I've seen them up there. They're used till 10 p.m. at night with kids and just families using these facilities. So I think it's really not just looking at, you know, kids looking to play collegiate ball or kids looking to play outside, but we're losing a lot of our kids, and I think we all know that. We all know that, and it's, you know, again, matching this academic with extracurricular activities, I think is really, really important and vital for our kids right now.
And just jumping on what Tracy said and the woman from Springfield and CHA, when you start to risk losing these families that are really invested in their children's education and they're part of the fabric of the community, and you want to talk about academics and they're invested, and that's, you want your district to have a fine reputation, not just athletically, but academically, and that's what boosts our property values. So, you know, you take a big gamble when you start to say, oh, we don't need to do that, we don't need to do that. You start to lose a lot of these families. And as Tracy said, there are people in my neighborhood, they're going. So we really have to protect that because I care about my property values. I want the value of my home to stand and to continue to stand. So we really have to pay attention to that. That's important.
I agree with what both Mrs. Curlis and, I'm sorry, I don't know what Tracy said, but here's a concern that I have. I looked at, I think it was something on the township website that I think had to do directly with links to this particular project, and it was showing numbers of student population throughout the district, and the high school population has been flat for a while. And I'm an alumni, graduated almost 30 years ago. I graduated 125 kids in my class in 1988. According to the numbers that you opened with, there's 2,400 kids in the district now, so that roughly translates to we have approximately 120 kids in each grade in the high school.
It's actually closer right now to about 160, 165.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's coming up, as I said. What we are finding now is the population, for example, at Enfield, when I first came to the district 4.5 years ago, we were hovering around 180 children per class. We're now at about 210. So that's how much it's grown just in 2 grades. Those kids, of course, are filtering up through Erdenheim. We've added teachers and classes.
I know we have at the elementary level,
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
And it's coming up. Yeah, so keep in mind.
I think that they're coming to the high school because a lot of parents choose for a variety of reasons. Some parents choose to send their kids to private schools or diocesan schools or Catholic schools or whatever. Sometimes parents relocate, whatever the reasons. There's not always a guarantee that when a child starts here in kindergarten that they're going to graduate from here. You know, we don't have those guarantees. And my concerns is how do we know that we're going to have the numbers to substantiate the cost in having especially with the auxiliary gym. The field space I can understand because you absolutely want to, not only for the current athletes, but for the community, the various other groups, maybe the area CYO groups, if they use the fields, whatever, because they're also paying to use them. But, the cost of the auxiliary gym. Where are we justifying this, and how are we guaranteeing that we're going to continue to have this growth? Because, I'm not really seeing that hugely more of an amount of population in the school than there was 30 years ago.
We are. Within 4 years, it's been 20% district-wide, and in some of the schools as high as 33% increases. You're right. No one has a crystal ball into the future. We can't predict how many of that surging enrollment growth that we are seeing will, in fact, make the determination to go from our middle school to our high school. You've heard some of the people here say we want to try to be able to assure that by offering them upgraded facilities. But again, there are no guarantees. But I think based on what we are seeing from our feasibility study, which so far has been right on track, the projected increase in many of those students continuing on, the lion's share of our students do continue on. So the greater majority of our students do come into our high school. And those that drop out, while we are obviously always concerned about those numbers for the various reasons, are nonetheless a significant minority. The majority do come on up. So if we continue to see the population surges that we have been seeing over the last several years, and by the way, they are projected to continue for the next 5 years, that's a 9-year spread of time. So the chances are that the vast majority of those students will end up repopulating the existing population, which is significantly higher at the high school than it was 5 years ago, is pretty vast. So thank you all for your input and for your questions. I do appreciate it. Let me turn it over to Dave, who's been patiently waiting to show you some other information about the project.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm going to try to do is, we have responded to some of the ideas that you saw earlier, and it's been very interesting to do the survey because a lot of those concerns are concerns that we heard early on, both from administration, staff, and so on. So some of the things that we're going to show hopefully will attack some of those ideas. Now, these are very preliminary, and the intent behind all of this was to get reactions. So it's actually nice to hear folks reacting to the different ideas. So we just talked about, to some extent, the need, the community survey. I'm going to talk a little bit about the site and how we tried to address some of those issues. Very high level, this is all for reaction. There's nothing that's been submitted to anybody. There's nothing that has been finalized. This is all very sketchy. There is an issue in that in the new land of architecture, you produce drawings that look a little farther along than they actually are. So bear with the fact that they actually look like they're construction documents. They're not the old sketches that we used to do. And then we'll talk about the building. One thing to keep in mind is that with the high school concept here, we will eventually have something at Enfield, and there has to be some give and take on that site to accommodate whatever's happening to the different sports complexes that we're going to be dealing with on this site. And we recognize that, and we're taking all of that into account with administration as to how to handle the playing fields. So looking at this site, and just a real quick recap, just because we just had a long conversation away from the site, this is a primary issue in the circulation on the site. The other one, obviously, is the access through the site and the fact that the only place where it can converge is actually around a bus loop. And so that creates obvious circulation challenges for you. And clearly, this spot right here at 309 is a massive challenge. So no matter what we show as a sketch, there are 3 more entities that have to play in this game. We will have to hire a traffic engineer who will do some initial concepts after having had conversations with the township's traffic engineer, and then the 2 of them will go to PennDOT and work together with PennDOT to figure out the best way to handle all of the traffic along here, because they all know it's a challenge. And so we know one thing about the site. There's one thing that we can start to identify as a solution, but the balance of it, as far as how you create lanes through here, whether you do left and right-hand turn lanes, what kinds of tapers you have and things like that. What they did in the last go-around was based upon the area that they actually have to work with from a pavement standpoint. And so they did their very best here to try to reorient traffic back onto the roadways, and obviously it's a challenge. So from this point forward, we have a little bit more latitude in that we have frontage here that we can work with from a highway standpoint. And because we're going to make any moves on this site, we're going to have to do some highway work there as well. We don't know what it is. It's going to come out of a bunch of smart people who do traffic design for a living. So this is a sketch. It's a little bit further derived sketch than Dr. Hacker was showing you earlier, and it starts to attack some of the issues. And let me show you some of the things that are kind of fixed in place. The stadium's a massive asset. It's not something that you just pick up and move. And so in a way, that's anchored. No matter what we do with it, it's still there. And to move a giant stadium is a massive amount of work to do. So we have to kind of stick with the location as it stands for the moment. The second thing that creates some challenge on a site is a baseball field. The baseball field happens to be one of the largest space consumers on a site. And so we have to find areas on the site that are very large in scale to allow us to try to structure a baseball field in those areas. So we began to look at the site with those pieces as major playing pieces. We also looked at that challenge of parking that you currently have. And the parking scattered further away and kind of around the side of the high school and so on is something that if we can try to centralize it and build all of the fields and the athletics and the academics around it, we think we have a better solution in place. And so those all come together along with that queuing pattern on Paper Mill Road, which will probably drive our driveway down much closer to your stadium. And so you'll already start to see a new access point and a new axis and access. And so that is a solution, a potential solution as a beginning point. Now, how the road lanes converge into that has yet to be worked out. What we do here as an access point is yet to be worked out as well. So that is circulation pattern issue A. The second is how to bring the parking back into the center of the site so that all of the playing fields and the academics are all accessible from that centralized parking. And so the concept was to try to bring that all back into the center of campus. And at the same time, while we have an area of bus circulation in the morning and in the afternoon, to try to find a way to reroute traffic around that to try to avoid that. And so you start to see another traffic pattern around the back of the high school here, so that you now have actually 2 access points to start to stack parent drop-off. And we think, yes?
Has the traffic from LaSalle been considered?
Again, no traffic studies have been conducted. We're just getting to the point where we will do that, and unfortunately it will be, or maybe fortunately.
Okay, because it just, as you move, as you move it closer that way,
Yeah.
you're getting into that LaSalle mess.
The LaSalle mess versus the 309 mess are the 2 issues, and you kind of have to weigh. And what they'll do is the traffic study will be conducted at 3 or 4 different times during the day, and they'll try to pick up all of those major issues. So there'll be rush hour times that they'll pick up, and then they'll pick up all of the school access and egress times. So it's going to be a really interesting study. Might be a little scary to look at for all of us, but it'll be a reality. So that's some of the circulation through. One of the other things you heard Dr. Hacker react to as part of the survey was the front door. Now, to some extent, it's kind of a misnomer that you don't have a front door. The front door is not visually accessible as you drive up. That's the reality. The front of the building actually is a pretty handsome building. It was reconstructed a number of years ago and is a good-looking front door to the building, and the question is, how do you get people to it? And so that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create a little bit more of a boulevard that you come down next to the stadium, and as soon as you get into that, and we'll call it a parent drop-off lane, but it's a pickup and drop-off boulevard, and that leads you right to the front door. So now there's a real visual access back and forth to the playing fields and back to the academics. And then we pick up a large amount of parking between these two areas, which will be an increase in parking over the current parking that you have. So that's kind of how we structured the internal part of the site, and it seems to help out quite a bit from the circulation from Hawes Lane as well as from Paper Mill Road. So the other challenge then, once you get past that, is where do you locate all these? Yes?
As that picture is configured, if that were to be the way that it were to end up working out, does that disconnect connecting Erdenheim to?
No, not at all. Actually, I'm not orienting you very well. This is the parking lot that you likely parked in right out here, and there's the facilities building. So it's sneaking around right behind over here and comes down next to where your current tennis courts are.
Okay, so instead of it being by the cafeteria that you go around, you now connect it from the back.
Yeah, so you could literally go through this parking lot and down and around.
If it was sunlight, you would see it.
Yes.
It would be right out here.
Okay, so you'd be connecting back this way instead of connecting in front of the cafeteria.
Or do both.
Right. So that starts to alleviate some of the issue with the bus turnaround as one of the major issues. Back to the playing fields, when you count up all of your spring sports and your fall sports, the end result is at any one point in time, you probably need 4 playing fields plus a stadium, and then you need 2 baseball and 2 softball to make all of this work. That's about what it amounts to when you start to really stack it all up. So as you already heard, one of the things that we'll be trying to do is to redo the stadium with all of the playing lines, or at least 3 sets of playing lines, so that we can start to use that for multiple sports. This field right here, at this point we're thinking would be the field hockey field with turf. And so that would be its own dimensional, its own depth of turf. And then we would have a competition baseball field at one of these 2, likely this one. And so the competition structures would all be at the front of the site, and then your secondary baseball field, and then your 2 softballs. And for the moment, what we've got, and we've been trying to squeeze and push, and what you don't see on a site like this is you don't see all the terrain and how you get from field to field. And there's always a challenge. For instance, back here where the current tennis courts are, there would be a jump down from one field to the next to make all of this work, and you start to see a little bit of a retaining wall happening here to try to pick that surface up. So the civil engineer's working back and forth with all of the terrain to try to make these things fit. Yes?
Would there, are one of those a soccer field, or would the soccer be in the stadium?
So the intent would be that we would set this up as a soccer. We would set this up, depending on when it's being used for competition, as another one. And then, of course, you've got your field hockey. And then what we would do is we would set up, and this is pulled up into the diamond, but we'd pull it back down and into the turf itself, or the grass. I have to differentiate between turf and grass. No, that's okay. So what we were able to get was 3 of those fields, and we're struggling to find the 4th. So we're going to keep working on that until we get somewhere with it. Yep.
I'm not going to play, I don't know if my kids don't play field hockey. Why is it like not a multi-purpose field? Like what's going to make it specifically?
The truth is, it is multi-purpose, but we're trying to set it up so it has an advantage for at least one of the sports that has a harder time on the other turf.
It will have a different type of playing?
It'll just have a slightly different depth to it.
Depth of
Depth,
turf, like
yes.
The type of turf it's laid.
Correct.
But other sports will be able to use it for practice and
So in the spring, you're going to have, in the spring, you're going to have not just lacrosse, but you're going to have baseball that can't go into the fields, but can still use a turf facility for fielding.
Exactly. Well, so the same issues, when you start talking about those sports, track becomes a challenge, right? And how you get all the track events. So we're going to have to find a way to get our javelin shot put and all of those things in an outfield area. so that they don't cross their paths at the same season. So we're trying to set all of those pieces up so they all work at the same time. And as you can see, you've only got so much real estate. It seems to be fitting with the exception of one field. Yes?
I'm not really very athletic, so if this is a stupid question, I apologize. Why can't you play softball on a baseball field? Why do you have to have
Very different dimensions. Yes?
So you see where the stadium is?
Yeah.
And then at the top side, there was a rectangular field?
Is it this one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Multi-purpose. It'll be set up for all sports.
Football practice.
Exactly. Yep. So we'll try to have it so that you've got 2 footballs going, if that's the case. Certainly the 2 soccers. We'll have the field hockey, the lacrosse, and try to get all those in during the different seasons. Right now, okay, that's the tough call. Right now, the turf is on this field and this field, and the balance will be new surface, but they'd all be natural grass. Yes?
And I'm assuming that the stadium will have netting so that you can run a track practice at the same time that you're running a lacrosse practice.
Yeah, we're a little concerned about those 2 crossing, but if they're played at the or practiced at the same time, they will. You would never do a competition at the same, right. So the scheduling will always be a challenge, as you know. But we'll try to make sure that those have safety precautions. And I'll tell you, today when you set all of these up, you typically end up with netting at the end of all of these types of fields that either go over the property line or go into another field. I think, yes, sir.
The fields that are going to be grass, will they do in-ground irrigation? So
Conversation is starting about that. We'll let you know where we get with it.
And just understand, just for scheduling, JV baseball and varsity baseball, they play at the same time. So any of our outdoor sports, typically JV and varsity play at the same time. So people say, why don't you just play one game?
Right.
And because you don't have to light all over the property. JV can't play at 3:30 in the morning, and it makes it for a late night too. So as you know, if you have kids who play sports here, some of the sports, particularly softball and baseball, they're playing simultaneously. So we have to have that second field. You just run out of days of the week. And we're also at the beck and call, so to speak, of Square One. They schedule the games. And we're not like, oh, Monday's going to work better for us because they get very upset when we start to reschedule games.
Right.
And some of those schedules are set years in advance, but we typically do stuff simultaneously. So.
Yes.
So I don't think I'm seeing the tennis courts there.
Okay, so the tennis courts have moved to this point.
Oh.
Yes. So, yeah, they're up the hill, and so the challenge is how you set up the last softball field behind those tennis courts. And what we've been struggling with is whether you can get one more playing field up here, but the problem is once you move these tennis courts anywhere else, and we played with them here as well, they displace another diamond, and that's our problem, is trying to find the places for the diamonds. Yes?
minor question, but what's the distance from home base to Paper Mill Road?
Home base to Paper Mill Road, that's probably a very good question. I'm not equipped to tell you that right now, but we can certainly get you some answers on that.
The current field, I've seen very few home runs. I've been to hundreds of games there. The current field, that's a scary hit. That's about 360 feet to land on Paper Mill Road, where the current home plate is. And I've seen it
Yeah.
multiple times. Yeah, so.
It's at least equal. We actually pulled it back a tiny bit, but I can get you the real dimensions. It's a really good question. No,
Also knock down the problem by putting up, kind of like a Fenway model.
Right.
With the higher fence.
And PennDOT doesn't take that into account in their tennis, or in their traffic studies. Yeah.
What's the stormwater impact of this whole entire configuration, based on the fact that this township has extraordinary
Yes, it does.
problems with stormwater?
Yeah. The good or bad news is, the good news for the township, the bad news for us and the client, is that you have to treat your site now as a meadow condition, as you probably know. And so the goal is to, as a meadow, as in a natural field. And so the goal is to capture all of your stormwater on site and to let it drain on site. So we're dealing with as much of that as possible. The civil engineer has not set the detention and retention facilities up on most of the site. What you do start to see is you start to see where he's picked up some detention or retention basins, I should say. But really, he started to focus on this only because this is phase one, which I'm going to try to get to in a couple of minutes here. And then from that point on, he's going to have to do full stormwater calcs for the site.
Is that harder, I guess, is the turf?
It is more difficult with the turf. The good news about the turf, though, is you can put big capture basins underneath it. Once you start to excavate, you've got room to do that. Yes?
Just an idea for your extra softball field.
Yes.
When we were younger, the JV team from middle school used to go to Enfield and then elementary. So then we're going to carve out some linear fields. I mean, that's a solution.
It's part of a solution. I thought we were dealing with some of the middle school facilities up there as well. Was that not the case?
Yeah, I know. The
Yeah.
examination of Enfield, would be to create some additional fields there for maybe middle school use. And then, I'm not that familiar with middle school.
One of the issues, quite frankly, is we're not sure yet how much space we'll have at Enfield, because as we delve more deeply into that discussion, part of the issue is, do we keep the newer portion of Enfield where there's a library and a full-size gym underneath, keep that for community use as well as both a community center and meeting place, as well as the full-size gym, which we still need. And if we do, that limits the amount of playing field space that we have. So those are part of some of our future decisions that we have to start talking about.
Let me share a couple other ideas here so you can see what is starting to take shape. So that's kind of the site as a whole. We're going to focus just a little bit to try to get you a sense. And again, this at least you can tell is very sketchy. It's all sketch concepts, and we're just starting the process. So the circulation, a couple of things to take into account. You start to see a little bit larger paved area here or sidewalk area. That would be what we would propose as a new entry to the athletic complex, the indoor athletic complex. So it would be the new gym entry. Some of those things that Dr. Hacker was addressing that are issues with the lobby entry area, with some of the athletic spaces that are available from the parking lot. Yes?
So would that be, and I'm comparing it just upper Dublin because we're there for a lot of sport events, would it kind of be like an athletic entrance?
I might be able to help you with that in a slide here. Let's see if we can get somewhere. So for better or for worse, we did take some shots at it, but this is part of why we're here talking to you, to get some feedback on these. So as you can see, there's a front entry, which you now would pull right up to, and then there's also an athletic entry. So just to show you, this is the parking lot, or the access points with the tennis courts and so on. So we see this as a phase one and phase two, and there's a real reason for this phase one. The phase one, we're trying to get the field artificial turfed or synthetic turfed, and I should say the stadium field, because the goal really is to have that as one of your swing fields while you're doing the construction on any of the other fields. And that's a really big issue. So we're calling the work that's going on here, meaning the synthetic turf here, plus whatever drainage goes along with it, plus some of the stormwater, that's what the light blue is, plus the new track, as phase one. We've had some preliminary conversations with the township, and the township seems amenable to working with us on that as a very short approval process, knowing that all of this work is going to be a long and comprehensive process, going through the PennDOT and through all of that. But what it does is, if we can get this work done, it will give us at least a little bit of swing space while we start to do all of the work on these, so you can start to schedule some of this. That's not to say you're not going to be doing a lot of scheduling of your playing in other locations during construction of this, and that's yet to be worked out. We're just in the preliminary conversations about how you do that. So that is a preliminary sketch of the beginnings of at least several of the different playing configurations and lining on that field. This is by no means an end result. So that's kind of the beginning of what you'll see. We will have a transition period here where you can still play on the softball field, and we're going to start to stack some of the dirt from this back behind the periphery of the back radius, and that'll allow us to do a little bit of on-site construction while the current playing fields are being used. We're also looking at one of the other things that was brought up was a small concessions and ticket structure, which you saw kind of on axis from the front entry of the building. And that'll be a place right at the entry where you can come in and it'll be a little snack bar as well as a ticket booth for your athletic events at night. Yes?
So that dark area where the soil's coming out?
Yes.
So I happen to live on Fraser Road,
Mm-hmm.
and I face that new mound. So those fields are now about, is it 6, 8 feet higher than they were 5 years ago when we did earth climbing? So remember, that's where all the excavation went, that's where all the extra soil went, and then we resurfaced those fields. We went from flatland to easily, with compaction,
That's a great word. That's the right word.
they're now 6 feet higher than they were before.
Maybe the football practice field?
Where the soccer field is now. So that used to be level, and now it's 6 feet
Oh, where the
higher.
fence is, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now it's a hill, and that wasn't there before. And I know that all those neighbors had substantial runoff issues.
Mhm.
Now there's a giant hill in their backyard that wasn't there before.
There was a berm that was put in around that area.
Yes, that's what they did to fix it. But that wasn't in the plan, that was because they got flooded.
That's right, that was
Yeah, that was
after the
after
fact,
that.
you're absolutely
So I'm
right.
just saying that now if we're going to use that as a,
Yeah.
get a mountain for more soil, that has to be considered.
Yes.
Those neighbors are going to be really
Yeah.
upset to see this mountain coming back.
No doubt.
And they really got it.
By the way, Harry in front of you is taking notes. So, yep.
I appreciate that, because that is,
Huh? Stormwater.
it's a huge difference.
Okay, so let me just give you one sense here. This is about 2 months.
That's all fine, I just think
Yeah.
you need to let those neighbors also
Yeah.
know.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
Nancy, that's what we actually talked about, I referenced that before, that we were going to inform the neighbors and
Yeah.
everything. So that's a great point, we're both writing that down to make sure that we include that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
I understand that the turfing is staying in this baseline, correct?
Yes.
Can they be temporary lines for field hockey?
They probably can. Yeah.
Very says yes.
They can,
Harry says yes.
they do.
Okay, so
Handle building. So there's handle. There you go.
I think Harry wrote that down, so that'll be, I'm not trying to be facetious. We have written these things down, so we will try to keep track of how those are. So this is a little hard to see, but this is the current pool, and here's your gymnasium. And you know this front entry point here. This is the entry doors that Dr. Hacker showed in the slides previously. And so this will get bigger, so don't think you have to strain your eyes yet. But if you can watch the back and forth there, you can start to see where some of the work in the building will be done. So what we're dealing with here as we get into the spaces, we've got a variety of TV studios and classroom and athletic director spaces right here. We have team room, trainer, and so on in this space, and then you can see that there's nothing out here. And then the girls' locker room, of course, is up above here on the second floor. So what we're trying to do with this concept is to bring the girls' locker room down directly across from the boys' locker room so that everything is, all of the locker room spaces, including a variety of team rooms, are now down on the ground floor. And so how does that work? So this is a concept. A lot of times when we're looking at athletic facilities for performance, for evening use, for afternoon use, for events, we try to look at a front of house and a back of house. And so this front of house, which is the new construction portion, is where I, as the public, come to go into either of these facilities. And so what you're seeing is the auxiliary gym here, and then there's your main gym. And what we're trying to do is to do a very wide main entry, kind of a Hall of Fame entry down from the parking lot, so you come right into that. And a very wide space also between these two gymnasiums. Also in the front, obviously a large bathroom area for the public. We've got the athletic director space up here. We've got the fitness rooms and the training spaces up here, and then a concessions and ticket booth directly facing from that lobby. So there's a natural flow straight into that and then into one of the venues. So the goal is to try to create a front-of-house athletic facility that then, from the back of house, is actually all locker room spaces. So you're not going from floor to floor. Yes? With one exception.
For what's on the table right now, the $28 million, are there any renovations to the existing pool area?
Not currently. We did not start to investigate that because we just heard about the concerns about the pool when we got the survey.
I would say that the aquatics program in this township is probably one of the biggest programs.
Mm-hmm.
And we currently have a 6-lane pool. You have 10 and unders who are swimming up to 12 and unders. You've got 15 kids in a lane, and it's dangerous. And I don't see the sense in spending all this money and doing all these renovations without addressing the problem that our pool is beyond out.
And if you had to name the biggest issue with the pool, are you telling me it's the lanes? 6 versus 8?
There's no place in the stands. You know, when you
Okay, so seating.
there's you can't even tell.
The showers in the locker rooms, they look like they're still stuck in the 70s.
That we know. Yeah.
For the aquatic club that uses it, the Springfield Aquatic Club, the private one, the girls' teams really don't have their own meets there.
Okay.
They can't, the girls' team is so much bigger than the boys that we're almost always getting.
Okay.
They can't have two water swim teams coming against each other.
The girls' team
Okay.
is the same size as the upper double girls.
Okay.
It's huge.
So we have not done anything to address that. So we'll start to talk about how we can tackle that as an issue too. But thank you. That's why I'd be writing here, but I think Harry is writing for, at least on my behalf. Dr. Hacker, obviously, too. So you can start to see how we pick up team rooms, how we pick up some of the coaches' spaces, how we pick up a training space, and then the girls' locker room comes down on the ground floor. And quite frankly, now we'll start to think about how we might be able to look at the aquatics lockers at the same time.
Room where it is.
Say that again?
What's wrong with the girls' locker room where it is?
If you have an ADA challenge, for instance, you actually have to come back over to this side of the building to get to the elevator to get back up to the girls' locker room. So we're just trying to get all of the same uses in the same areas.
I would guess when they renovated the place 20 years ago, they just put the girls' locker room on the second floor. It's a
It
very,
was always on the second floor.
understood, but it's very odd to have a locker room 50 yards away from the gym. You can't supervise. If you're a female staff member, you have to go up to the locker room and supervise. Well, you're not in the gym when the girls come down and get dressed. The other part is, in the morning, you have to come into the building. If we use it for sports teams have to go up to the second floor. It's just
Yeah.
they must have just run out of room, I guess. It doesn't make sense whenever that happened or if it's been there for
It was built.
yeah, well, it's an odd, very odd system.
Yeah.
And by moving it down, it's for supervision, sports teams can then use it.
Right.
We're not going to have sports teams going into our buildings.
So then what goes where?
Yeah, so then up above goes the TV studio. So we brought the TV studio from downstairs up. So the TV studio is now right adjacent to the media center, where it should be, and the locker room is next to the locker rooms, where it should be.
Can we ask, what's the TV studio?
We actually have a TV production program here in the high school. Students take coursework in TV production and design. So we actually have a studio for it.
So it's an academic.
It's an academic area, yes.
I think you had a...
I just didn't know if we were talking about the pool stuff, something to consider. If the pool was bigger, could they just somehow share the locker room facilities?
Either sharing or figuring out how to get them right into that same spot, I think is a reasonable solution. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yes?
This question is actually more geared towards either Dr. Rittenhouse or Dr. Hacker. Were either of you here when the last bit of construction was done on the gym area here?
Yeah, well, with gym renovation, I was here for something for the floor, that was it.
Okay. All right, then you guys probably wouldn't know. There used to be a loft.
Yeah, they filled that in.
So what's there? Anything?
The fitness center is still there.
How do you access it?
There's the fitness center is also on the second floor, which is, again, is odd. It should be on the first floor. If you go up a set of steps to go to the fitness center, and again, as a coach and as a teacher, it's difficult if you can't split your class.
Right.
And for those that don't know, if you're sitting in the big stands in the last row, if you would turn around and stand up and knock, that would be where the fitness center is. It used to be, your references, it was open
Right.
before, and the fitness center, and like I said, it's just an odd thing that it's on the second floor. Yeah.
So then would the fitness center also be being moved?
Yeah, so let me help you with that. So the fitness center would come down here, so it's actually right in and amongst all of these spaces, plus it's also accessible from the playing fields. And to your point, the way that you used to access this mezzanine was either up through this back stair or through the girls' locker room. And so what we're suggesting is if the girls' locker room goes downstairs and the TV studio comes up, you create that corridor right adjacent to the media center that should really be there to access these points and to get to that means of egress.
The studio is right next to the library, which is great.
Yep.
Some things they could work together on, so.
So then would the current fitness center then become part of the new studio?
That becomes another athletic space for you right here. And it's either, right now you do some batting in the gym. This would become a space that you could do that training, or you could use it for other athletics.
The idea is to potentially move the batting cage there for softball, for baseball, for lacrosse. The batting cage is now on the ceiling of the varsity gym. That's an unusual model that you go to other schools. It's not a typical model of having a batting cage up in the ceiling of your varsity gym. And that would be a multi-purpose place. And the kids could bang it up a little bit.
Yep.
We beat up our gym. It's all good. I have a lacrosse player. I mean, but that floor is not made for lacrosse sticks and field hockey sticks. So, they use it, of course, but I understand that, but it gets scratched up and yeah. So it's just
Yeah, so this starts to bring the pieces back to where they should be in the building. So,
If it's a synthetic surface, you can play outside all year long.
yes.
You know, it's,
Yep.
there's nothing wrong with playing inside in January, December.
You don't have that luxury today. Right. Right. So again, these look like they're final drawings. In the rest of the world, these would be hand sketches, but today the computer is much easier, well, I say that, to generate these things. So that's, those were some of the concepts for inside the building. You can see on the ground floor how you'd have a new access point or major access point, access between the two gyms. You'd get your fitness area, you'd get a large bathroom to support the needs of especially your varsity gym, and then your training space that is accessible right to the playing field should something happen out there, as well as what's going on in these spaces. So that's kind of how that's structured. I did want to talk about the phasing real quickly. We started to talk about how that works. That would be phase one, that area, and that's basically the stadium. So that would be the turf, and that would be the track, and that would be some minor renovations and potentially that little concession building. And then phase two would be the work around the high school.
What's your time frame on phase one?
Well, so what, that's the problem. So phase one, we think we can get into an approval process by March of the coming year here. And that would allow us to bid in the spring and start construction so that it can be done through the summertime. So in the fall, theoretically, you would actually be able to start using that.
How early in the fall?
By opening of school.
What can
What do you need from us to get that done?
So,
shovels in the closet. That's so we're going to go out to the field.
So what would happen in the meantime is you would be using the time from today that you folks are talking about this through probably next year at the same time, because that is literally how long this approval process will take, especially because PennDOT will be involved and all the traffic discussions out front. And so at that point, you could bid it next fall and begin construction on the balance of the site after that turf is done. So the turf's done, you move on to the turf, and then we start probably area by area around the building. The hang-up I will tell you right now is that, as you know, planted fields take at least a season, I mean a full year's set of seasons before you can really use them. So we have concepts for whether we can do sod as an alternate, so at least we can see what the price. These are all things that we have to think about as we go forth. But we're going to try to make those playable as fast as possible to get everybody back onto the site.
There will be drainage in those sports fields?
There is drainage in those.
Springtime, when it rains, baseball fields are useless because of the amount of water.
Correct. Correct. Yes.
How is turf maintained in the long run? Like, is it
It
Maintained the same way that a grass field?
Not at all. It doesn't take a ton of upkeep over the years, but it takes replacement at the end of, what is it, about a 15-year process, Harry, typically? So
So does that mean that we need less ground crew then to maintain the field space if we're going to have less grass field space?
for the turf only.
Not less grounds crew, because don't forget they're maintaining everything else that we are developing with the new fields around the district, but less maintenance on that football field and that field hockey field. No watering, no grass seed, no cutting the lawn, all of those things don't have to be done. So there is a cost avoidance for each of the years that you have turf.
Our maintenance guys also, they set up games, they put the pylons up in football, they bring all the yard markers out, they bring the goals out, et cetera. I mean, there's still other pieces that they do.
Yep.
And there's, I mean, and the thing is too, there's money to be made on these facilities. I mean, you put a turf field in, and my daughter plays soccer on the far northeast at Webby High School, and you had 4 or 5 teams, soccer teams, on a quarter of the field, because practice time is so, you know, but then you're talking, you know, I know it's an issue.
It's just like having a lighted field. Yeah.
You know, it's, people are willing to take a half of the field.
Yep.
And they can get practice.
And they do.
December, January, February, any of the sports. So, you know, I think it's,
Well, it's, as I,
really going to use it, it really can, it can bring in revenue, keep our families here, and, you know, act as a service to the community as well. You know, it's done, scheduling is done right.
excellent point. Yep. Yes.
The type of turf that you're getting, is it plowable in the winter or snow?
Now, do you do that? That's a decision to be made by the district. Yes.
So there's no damage then to set up for commencement out on the turf field because we have commencement out in the stadium?
There are things you should and shouldn't do on it, but realize what it essentially is. It's a carpet of filaments that comes up, and then it's filled in with the little granular rubber. And so what you're essentially hurting when you hurt it is just you're compressing the granular rubber.
Okay, so what shouldn't you do?
We should probably bring a turf person in to talk about those things rather than have architects talk about it. So that's something that I would really like to do if we have another one of these presentations or when we have another. It's a good...
Hamilton Worship has their graduation on their field, PW has theirs.
Yeah.
Field, so, you know, it's doable.
Can you touch on the, just because I know about these things, but can you just touch on the maintenance of the turf field, because they're truly not maintenance free. There are, like Dr. Hacker said, other things in watering and reseeding and top dressing and all that stuff. You still have to worry about the rubber pellets.
It's, yep, yes they do.
As we all know, with girls' sports, they wear hairpins, they flow out on the turf. Those type of things have to be magnetically removed from the field. I'm not sure, but there has been study cases on the turf does have to be disinfected from time to time for MRSA and stuff like that. I don't know if it's an ongoing thing, but there are maintenance procedures that have to go on turf. It's truly not maintenance free.
That is correct.
So you said there's a 15-year lifespan?
Typically on the carpet.
No?
It's not restricted. And that duration is even going beyond that. A lot has to do with the amount of play and how it's maintained. There's a lot of different recommendations. Typically, they're renewed every 4 to 6 months. That's part of the program. So there are some that David mentioned that I think it would be good, and we've met with Phil and some of the turf experts.
You're right, though. Nobody should go away from here thinking they're maintenance-free. There is work to be done. You're not mowing and fertilizing. That's what's happening. Watering, filling in the divots. You had a question, sir.
I was just wondering if the turf manufacturer indemnifies itself in case you do have
answers problems with the material field?
I'm going to guess the answer is no, because I believe that what happens in those cases is, if there actually is one, is it ends up being class action type situations. But again, those are things that we would bring them in to talk about. Neither of us professes to be an expert in turf. We've just installed them as part of our designs. So I'd rather bring turf folks in to talk to you specifically. Yeah.
If the turf field only lasts 15 years, how much is the cost to replace it when it wears out?
The price of a turf field at that point in time.
Which is?
Well, right now, the turf itself, the turf products, you'll find them anywhere between $400,000 and $600,000 for a total replacement, and I think that's with drainage.
Field?
Yep. And then there's the costs. Yeah, and then there's all of the grading costs that go along with that. And it's a question of whether you're redoing a field so that it's being made turf, which is more expensive, or whether you're pulling up the carpet from an old turf and putting down a new carpet. Those are two different things. So again, those are the types of things that I'd love to have a turf person tell you the realities of. We only know what they bid for. So. They are. They are. Now, there's some pretty good studies out there about the cost of maintenance of grass fields versus the cost of maintenance of a turf field, and those are all worth seeing as well. So it'd be good for us to get all of that for folks here. So we actually had in mind that we would start taking questions and really kind of see what we missed and see what kinds of ideas you had and what thoughts you had to make these better or things that we were missing. Heard a lot about the pool. So I think we'll need to attack that with the administration. We've written everything, although they would have been up here, but it's now down there. What else are we missing? Yes?
Another cost question.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Hacker. So you laid out the timeline, I appreciate that, of when these would be designed, constructed, ready for use.
Right.
When will it hit the budget for the real estate taxpayers? And what's the millage that would result?
Great questions. Yeah.
Is that, I know you have other construction to talk about, different buildings, Antonelli, Enfield, and so forth. Do those timelines overlap with these, and the cost impact of that? Bottom line, just like the lady who left the room.
What's it going to mean? Absolutely. Fabulous question. And I'm going to have Mr. King address it. What we are basically doing, to give you kind of the short, abbreviated, clear answer, is combining it all together, going out for debt in certain incremental amounts for the the Enfield replacement project with the elementary school, as well as this project for the high school. So we're kind of bundling it all together with a couple of separate debt issuance issues to cover the cost of everything, the elementary project as well as the high school. So Mr. King can give you the exact millage as well as the percentage increase on the average taxpayer's amount per year for the number of years. Got it. Got it. But because, yeah, the millage he can tell you because he's got those numbers. And we can also tell you that, and we're keeping our fingers crossed with when this actually happens, there is land development going on in the township with new construction going on with a big project in the Tsetse tract, and that will help to offset a significant portion of this. So Ken? It's starting.
Throw thing. Hello? I mentioned a little bit earlier about phase 1 and 2 of the high school. And including, again, using the estimates that we received from the feasibility study back in June 2015. The estimate for for both projects, the Enfield demolition is about $65 million in total. Enfield, Antonelli, and the high school. Now, all in, based on the feasibility study. Right. We are currently working on trying to get those numbers. We're having meetings like this, trying to decide what it's going to look like. That'll add into what the actual costs are. Now, what does that mean to the average taxpayer? Well, the average, based on the average assessment in the district, which is, pardon me? Millage, about, on average, it'll go up about 0.63 3 mills a year, which is roughly $800,000 a year for 3 years. Then it's in there and then it stops. So it's roughly $2.4 million going into the budget for the debt service. That's the total. That is if we had to fund the entire $65 million with bond issuance. As Dr. Hector indicated, we're going to fold the money the debt service is into. But that's, again, there are things that we can do, like using some of our reserves. For example, on phase 1, the stadium, the intention is that we're going to use reserves for that. So that's about $2 million worth of reserves to pay for that, which we won't have to borrow. That'll bring that millage down somewhat. I don't have all of that. So when I talk about this, I talk about the worst case scenario if we can't do anything else. So while we're going through all of these discussions, trying to figure out what and where and how and when, we're also trying to figure out how to reduce the impact on the taxpayer. One, the use of our reserves. And we'll know, as we go through this in years 2 and 3, we'll have a better idea of if we can use more, because we got to remember we're doing these 2 sites, but we still have other sites that we have to maintain. And those reserves are used to maintain those other sites. In addition to that, Dr. Hackner mentioned we're watching the Teetsy property very closely. It's on Ridge Pike, next to the Masonic Lodge. We understand that they are approved for development. The last information I have on that, the development should start in spring of 2017. And there's 2 different components. One hopefully will come online in 18 months, another one 36 months later. When they're fully online, that is going to add about $1.1 million in additional revenue in the form of real estate taxes. They have 2 different ideas for that. Atria, a skilled nursing facility. I think it's a 125 bed facility, room facility. Then they're going to build something called Squire Ridge, which is age restricted. It's about 130 rooms, but they'll come online slowly. Right now it's completely undeveloped.
Isn't there also proposed construction going on, being half in Springfield Township and half in Cheltenham Township on Willow Grove Avenue?
I've heard of that before. I haven't heard anything recent. I heard last year or so, but I haven't heard anything. Cottage homes, I think they were talking about building.
I think it's still not 100% determined what exactly, they're still going back and forth with the developer, because I think Cheltenham, the majority of it would be in, this is in the Black Rock area of the township, for those that don't know. I think Cheltenham Township is trying to block it, because the majority of it would be in Cheltenham Township, but I heard that they're looking to do a single family in Springfield Township. So I wasn't sure if that was...
I'll follow up definitely with that, because single family then is additional kids and all that kind of stuff. So I'm watching Teetsy very closely, because that's going to go a long way to fund a lot of this that we're looking at. In addition, we're looking at other parts of the budget, how things are going to move. We talked today, the turf field itself, there's not a lot of mowing, there's not a lot of seeding, there's not a lot of watering. There's savings involved with that. How much, we're trying to get an idea what that is, because if those savings go down, then the savings from those savings can then be used to meet the annual debt service increases.
New fields, won't you have to shift the maintenance to those?
But the 2 turf fields we're talking about, how much reduction maintaining the stadium turf and the new field hockey turf. We're still going to have other fields, of course, but
These will be all set to maintain new fields, so turf.
well, that's the discussion that we're having, that we're waiting with the experts. Is it cheaper to maintain a turf field than it is natural grass? Dr. Hacker alluded to that we're also looking at HVAC upgrades. That certainly will add energy savings and things of that nature. So we are we are definitely looking at trying to bring this cost down so that the taxpayer doesn't have to pay the full 2% increase per year for 3 years.
Is there any way to stage it more so it's spread out over further time?
We are, well, we can only stage it to the point where we have to start paying the bills. We have to pay the contractors, we have to pay everybody. So we need the money when the work is being done. So that's going to happen over a 1 to 4 year or perhaps longer period. So we have to stage the debt within a short period of time. By law, we also need to have the millage for that debt built into our tax base within 3 years, or by the end of, I think, the 1 year following the issuance of the debt. So we have to build that mills in. So we can only stage it so much. But we are trying various scenarios about what that looks like. We're working with the district's financial manager, or financial assistant advisor, to try different scenarios to see how that debt can be maneuvered to kind of slow it down or stage it. We're really looking at that Teetsy property moving out probably 3 years from now being fully, or 4 years from now being fully in our budget.
The other thing too is you don't really want to slow it down too much, because I think one of the larger classes in the district is the current 5th grade class. And by the time this is completed with 2018, they will be freshmen in high school. And you want these facilities in place by the time you're going to have that influx of students.
Oh, you're talking about not slowing down the project itself. Yeah.
I guess what I meant was not this, but the fact that
funding.
you're doing Antonelli, you're doing all the other things, so can it be spread out? Because yeah, the township is also raising their real estate taxes. We're getting like a double whammy.
I think what she's saying is like, can we maybe slow down on the elementary end of it and concentrate on the high school end of it now, get that part in place, and then wait a couple of years, and then maybe do the elementary end of it?
The problem,
Difficulty is the enrollment is increasing at the elementary level. And is slated to continue to increase over the next 5 years. We don't have enough room.
Believe me, my daughter just got out of the elementary school last year. I'm more than well aware of.
We don't have enough room to accommodate all the students. It also isn't handicapped accessible in certain areas of the building, and it's well over a 50-year building. So we've actually looked at the costs of renovating Enfield. That was one of the primary considerations before we actually made the determination. It was more cost effective to actually build a new school. The cost is very, very similar. If we were to fully renovate Enfield, not only to make it code compliant, handicapped accessible, update the boilers and all the HVAC systems and so forth, add on a new section in order to accommodate the increasing populations, we estimated it would cost somewhere around $23–24 million. The brand new elementary school at this point is slated to cost, I believe, around $28 million. And that includes tearing down Antonelli and redoing the site there. So when you think about what's worth it to do, plus recapturing the field space over at Enfield, it really made sense to see which is why we're
It's just a lot as a taxpayer to swallow all that at one time. And then we had this whole fiasco with the township selling the sewer system, and we only got grandfathered in for that for 2 years, and then we're going to get a big wallop at the end of 2 years on that when we have to go into their quote-unquote regular prices, and it's all going to be hitting us at one time. So if we could break it apart a little bit, it would, I think that's the point that she was trying to make.
And that's why the woman who left was so upset. And I hope you guys recognize that. There are a lot of people on fixed incomes, well, people that are still working, they have financial issues too. These are major hits, major.
And we do, and we certainly, thank you, Ken.
We absolutely do. And we know, and it's, what I said before was, in any community, you have a variety of people who live there and a variety of wants and needs. And I say it every year when I do budget presentations, that, what is important to some people and what they have a vested interest in is very different than what's important to other people. And we absolutely recognize that. For the people who made passionate points about their property values, how we want to keep our kids here, how we want our kids not only to be competitive in terms of the academic programs that we offer, so they choose to stay here in the township, and our athletic programs as well. But a lot of kids get college scholarships, which is a huge return on an investment for a taxpayer when their child is able to go to a better college and get a scholarship to send them there because of the academic program or the athletic programs in which they participated while they were a student here. So we get it. We understand. I don't think there's a community in America where you don't have everything ranging from brand new people who purchase a home and have no children, no stake in the school system, at least at that point, and senior citizens at the other end who've raised their children and who've gone through in a time when they didn't have what many people call the bells and whistles. I've had senior citizens many times come out and say in a public forum, we didn't have those computers when I went to school and I turned out okay. It's a different time. It is.
Look, most senior citizens will say they recognize that public education is the cornerstone of our society. So they're not...
We know they're not against education. We know that's not the issue. Yeah. And believe me when I say we know this, that's why Ken's here tonight. Ken wasn't here talking to you about the building and the construction. He's here because we understand there are legitimate concerns and questions about cost. Lisa.
I used to live in Upper Dublin before I moved here, and we were there for the whole decisions through the renovations they did there in the school district and the votes and the taxes. And I know that township was double the size of this school-wise, and I believe that project was like $160 million or something, somewhere around there. I don't know.
119,600,000.
But I will say, what it did.
And how many cents?
But what it did, we sold our house, and we sold our house in the total what was going on with reception, and what it did for our property value and what people wanted to do to move into that township. Because what happened with the high school renovations was it improved the parks and recs, it improved the schools, it made people want to live there. And I think people love Springfield to the community here, and I think it would really help our property values.
Believe me, we're very happy that more and more kids are coming into our schools because it is more money for every child that comes into the district, and we do want to keep them here. We do. Tracy.
Have you ever been approached by any of the local colleges, kind of partnership where Greater Chestnut Hills partnering with PW, and now I've heard Arcadia, and now Bishop McDevitt? How did we lose that? It's like they partnering with them, and it's my understanding that they are dumping, colleges are dumping. They're putting a lot of this. Have we ever been approached by any of the local colleges?
Certainly not during my tenure, but that's not to say that we can't approach them and say, look at what we're going to have, look at what we're planning, would you ever consider?
I heard McDevitt's going to get, which is crazy because the archdiocesan schools are folding and they're going to get, apparently, I only heard your side, they're going to get fantastic facilities because of Arcadia, their schools and needs for field have grown, and they're going to get, new complexes out of it. It's like, we're right down the road.
Harry, are you writing this down? That's a great suggestion. Absolutely. And like I said, no, it's...
I appreciate your receptiveness to this, understand. You're open and you're listening and you're hearing our thoughts. And I think so many of us have to say thank you that, we do understand that, your point and your, the financial part of it. And we just want to thank you for just really sitting here with an open set of ears and trying to look at our viewpoints, having young children, and we want for our kids. We know it's not easy. Of course you do.
Yes.
Just to touch on what you said about the colleges, with the stadium in general, with working with a local high school up the hill, who bypasses our township to use a football facility and pays thousands of dollars. Is there any talks to having them walk down the hill to use the stadium or get involved in the stadium?
Well, again...
Stadium play and they have a practice turf.
Yeah. And we actually just drove the property, And coincidentally, we were just approached by them about something else that they need. So we certainly can now open up more conversations about those kinds of sharing of facilities and perhaps some cost sharing as well. They use it once. It's been one time a year when they have some major event. Do you remember what the event?
I know at one point I believe LaSalle did use our stadium, but I think it's for some.
But they haven't recently. Now they only use it there. It's like one time a year.
It's not big enough. Like the LaSalle, I think they had 8,000 people there, but it's just not. Yeah, and at PW, I think they're even going out of PW. It's just we don't have a way stand. The stadium's beautiful. The stands are beautiful, and it's a great place. But it's not equipped for a gigantic, 2 football paddles like Pratt or Judge or Ryan. So it just wouldn't be big enough.
But we sure do have a lot of colleges around this area.
PW's getting turf baseball.
Gwinnett, I mean.
It's only those 2 schools, unless you consider the rabbinical college, and I don't think they're probably.
But I think those are the 2 that are within real driving distance.
Close enough that we could approach them.
The school was under construction on the East Universities for a while, a couple of years ago.
The university.
Yeah, Springfield. Because I drove my daughter down there to practice. It's really, I mean, it's really not far. It's not, but I mean, I don't know if LaSalle has a shuttle. Again, it's a 309 shuttle.
Yeah. Anything else that we can answer for anybody? Yes.
With the current Enfield Elementary site, like I know possibly making that playing fields, what would those fields be used for?
Chuck, do you recall, and I apologize, I honestly don't, and Jay, I just want to,
Kids there.
Jason Payne, who's our athletic director at the high school, would have been here this evening, but he had an emergency medical issue and may be in the hospital as we speak, so I apologize that he's not here tonight. It was very unexpected. So I'm not prepared. Enfield fields, what would they be used for?
Elementary, I think it's proposed to demolish it and put in additional playing fields.
Right.
So what would those fields be used for? Is it mostly for township?
I think we were talking about middle school, trying to take some of the overflow.
Yeah.
Right, but then at Township Park, there's a couple
Walk.
there's a couple constraints there. One, and the other thing wasn't mentioned like with the elementary school. It's just that's a tough location for to have kids on that busy corner. But the one talk is to preserve the library and the gym, which is beautiful.
Sure.
But when you do that, it's smack dab in the middle of the property. The other constraint is the right field of the playground softball field. It's a retention base. Like if you ever play there, it's always wet. There was talk of putting softball fields there, putting soccer fields there, and then the middle school would walk down, cross over, and use those fields because they have. There's not. You look at the middle school. There's not many fields there for them to play on. Then it would be community use. I think. And with those fields, and we're still talking, the other limitation too with the lighting, and I looked up before this meeting, the sun set at 6:07 tonight, I looked it up. So if you're a soccer coach, your practice is done at 6:07. More or less, everybody has the lights, and I know CYO rents and there's gas. That's just a terrible system of the soccer. You're putting the lights up on a pole, you can barely see them on the field. I think that's another benefit. If there's that stadium use, respecting the neighbors, of course, with not using it until all hours of the night. But the soccer program will be able to now have practice in the place. This is the middle of soccer season right now. If you're, and you have to stop practicing. I mean, that's the crazy.
We by almost 6 o'clock now. Our practice is over, so they get 20 minutes of practice when we're done.
That's it. Yep.
And then when you lose 2-1 or 3-2, you feel like, wow, boy, I just wish I could have practiced. Or you get paid. And you go indoors or you go somewhere else. So.
Yes.
How much of that proposed field space would we actually have to lose to accommodate for parking? Because obviously if you're going to have games there, you're going to want to have parents that are going to come and watch the games, so they're going to have somewhere that they can park because I'm presuming they're not just going to park all over people in the room.
It would really really depend on whether or not we do in fact get rid of the entire property or whether we do keep the gym and the area above it. Because if that's the case, the likelihood of having only one field is probably higher. Whereas if we were able to level the entire property, we'd have to fit in not only more fields, but also more parking to accommodate that.
Okay, and then the other part of that question is, there's that house there that used to have that greenhouse, the old Springfield Greenery. That, I believe, is, that greenery business isn't there anymore.
Correct, it's for sale. The property is for sale.
Is there any potential of the school district purchasing that and knocking that house down and utilizing that as extra space?
There is, we have inquired into that possibility. We actually inquired into that some time ago, but at the time, the pricing was not to our liking, shall I say. So we would have to be in a position where we believed that the price that they were asking was what we were willing to pay for the property. It's a negotiation. So thank you all so much. This was wonderful. We really appreciate your input and your thoughts, and we've written it all down. We're going to seriously consider everything we heard. David, thank you, and your group from Schrader Group Architects. Chuck, thank you. Ken as well. Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you.